Have you ever looked at your phone, at the list of contacts you used to speak with easily, and felt a strange, quiet chasm open up in your chest because you realized that you could call any of them, but you have nothing left to say that they would understand? And the thing that hurts most is not that they are bad people. It's that you love them genuinely in the will, but some essential thread of connection has been cut, and you do not know when it happened or why. So you sit there in the car after Mass, the ignition still off, watching the last few families walk to their vehicles, and you feel it, a loneliness that doesn't feel like an emotion. It feels like a state of being, and the quiet thought that you are afraid to say out loud, even to yourself, because it sounds prideful or crazy or both, is this: what if I'm not abandoned? What if I've been stationed? There's a particular kind of isolation that comes not from rejection, but from election. Most people never consider this. When they feel the circle of friendships contracting, they rush to fix it. They assume something is broken. They read books about making friends. They try to be more sociable. They lower their spiritual standards just a little to fit in. And sometimes that is the right response, because sometimes the loneliness is our own fault. But there is another loneliness, a far more disorienting one. That is not a sign of failure. It is a sign that God has moved you to a new post. And if you do not understand the nature of that post, you will spend years trying to desert a position that you were assigned by divine providence, and the desertion will cost you more than the loneliness ever did. Now, I need you to stay with me here, because this is not going to be a sentimental talk about how Jesus is your best friend and that solves everything. That's not how the human heart works. We are body and soul. We need the visible, the tangible. We need a voice that answers back in our own language, telling a person in agony that they shouldn't feel lonely because God is everywhere is like telling a drowning man that he shouldn't feel wet because water is made of hydrogen and oxygen. It's true. It's also useless if it's not applied with pastoral care. So we are going to examine this reality with all the rigor it deserves. And we are going to do it using one image that I want to anchor the entire conversation. The image is this: a citadel, a stone watchtower built high on a narrow ridge, far above the town. The air is thin there. The wind cuts through every layer of clothing. The sounds of the market, the laughter from the taverns, the everyday hum of human life, they do not reach that height, or if they do, they are carried only in distorted gusts that make them sound like something they are not. The man stationed in that citadel did not build it himself. He was placed there, and his entire existence, his purpose, his duty is not to enjoy the view or to feel comfortable. It is to watch, to see what the people in the valley cannot see because they are too close to their own affairs. The watchman's solitude is not a prison sentence. It is a function, and if he abandons his post to go down and find someone to have a drink with, the enemy can approach unseen, and the very people he was sent to protect will be overrun. This is the spiritual reality for souls that have been chosen for a particular intimacy with God. They are moved gradually and often painfully from the valley to the citadel, and they do not understand why their old companions no longer come up the mountain. But here's the thing. Have you ever noticed that most people don't like mountain paths? They're steep. They're lonely. They require a certain kind of breathing that you can't do if you're carrying too much weight. And the higher you go, the fewer people are willing to make the climb, not because they're evil, but because their legs are not trained for it, or because they simply have not been called to that particular ascent. And so the watchman looks down and he sees the warm lights of the town, and he hears the faint echo of voices, and his heart aches, not with superiority, with a kind of clean, cold sorrow that is very close to the sorrow of Christ looking over Jerusalem. Now, I want to pause right here because there's a common misunderstanding that I need to cut off at the root. Many souls in this condition start to panic. They think, I must be doing something wrong. If I were truly charitable, I would have friends. The saints had friends. Saint Francis had companions. Saint Teresa of Avila had her nuns and her confessors. Why am I so isolated? That's a good question. It's an honest question, but it's based on a false definition of friendship. Friendship, in the proper Catholic sense, is not shared hobbies. It's not emotional compatibility. It's not even mutual affection, though affection can be part of it. Friendship is a union of wills directed toward a common good. The will is the rational appetite, the faculty by which you love and choose. So if you and I will the same good for each other, and we pursue it together, we are friends. But here's the crux. What is the good that you, as a soul striving for holiness, most deeply will? It's God, it's union with Him. It's the narrow path of detachment, mortification, prayer, and fidelity. Now tell me how many people in your life, even good practicing Catholics, genuinely will that same good with that same intensity? Some will, a few. But most will a comfortable life, a moderate faith, a manageable version of religion that doesn't disturb the passions too much. And the moment you start wanting something more, the common good between you and them begins to dissolve, not because you stopped loving them, but because the good you are aiming for has diverged from the good they are aiming for. You're climbing. They're walking on level ground. You can still wave to each other, but the conversation becomes strained because you're both out of breath. Let me give you a concrete example. Say you've been battling a particular habitual sin. You finally, by the grace of God, take it to confession with real contrition, and you come out with a firm purpose of amendment. You're filled with a holy resolve. You want to guard your senses, avoid near occasions, maybe even fast. So you try to share this with a friend, not to boast, but because the experience is so powerful you need to speak it. And what does the friend say? Don't be so hard on yourself. God understands. We're all human. Let's just have a coffee and relax. Now, that friend is not a monster. They mean well, but in that moment, they are pulling you back down the mountain. Their will is for your comfort. Your will is for your sanctification. Those are two different goods. And if you stay in that conversation long enough, your resolve will weaken. You'll start to doubt the grace you received. You might even begin to rationalize the sin again. So what does God do? In His terrible, merciful wisdom, He often allows that friendship to cool. He puts a distance there, not because He doesn't love the friend, but because He loves you too much to let you be pulled off the path. The citadel is a protection before it is a sacrifice. But the sacrifice is real. And I don't want to pretend it isn't. There's a tendency in some spiritual writings to make the dark night sound almost romantic. It's not romantic when you're in it. It's just dark. I think of a man I know, not a public figure, just an ordinary Catholic trying to live his faith. He told me once that the worst part of his week was Sunday after Mass. He would go to the early Mass, the quiet one, where the liturgy is prayed with reverence. And for that 1 hour, he felt like his soul had been put back together. And then he would walk out to the parking lot, and the conversations would start. Football, politics, complaints about the parish council. Someone would invite him to breakfast, and he would go because he didn't want to be rude. And he would sit there for an hour and a half, feeling like an actor in a play he didn't audition for. He said, "Father, I love these people. I really do. I'd take a bullet for any one of them, but I can't talk to them about the thing that matters most to me. And when I drive home, I have to fight the temptation to just never go back." Now, is that man lacking in charity? No, his charity was evident in the fact that he kept showing up, kept being kind, kept biting his tongue when he wanted to scream that there are souls falling into hell every second. And we're talking about the parish fundraiser. His loneliness was not a punishment. It was the expected condition of a watchman who had been given eyes to see in the dark while everyone else was content with candlelight. And this is where the metaphor deepens. The citadel is not just a post, it's a training ground. The watchman needs to learn a new way of seeing. In the valley, you see by the light of the sun. You see faces, colors, familiar landmarks. In the citadel at 3 in the morning, there is no sun. There is only starlight or the faint glow of the moon or complete overcast blackness. You have to learn to see with a different kind of light. You have to learn to discern shapes in the darkness that would look like nothing to an untrained eye. That's the interior life. When God removes the visible consolations of human friendship, He is training the eyes of your soul to detect His presence without the usual sensory supports. And that training is excruciating because at first all you see is nothing. You sit in prayer and it's dry. You open your mouth to speak to someone and the words feel like dust. You reach out to an old friend and the silence on the other end confirms what you feared. And you think, I am completely alone. But you're not. You're in the dark watchtower and the enemy is moving in the valley, and your very presence there, your faithful, stubborn presence, is part of the defense. Now, I need to address a question that often comes up at this point. What about the demons? Because you can be sure that if a soul is being drawn up to the citadel, the enemy takes notice. The demons hate the watchman. They hate him because from that height, he can see their movements. He can sound the alarm through prayer and sacrifice, so they will do everything in their power to get him to abandon his post. And one of their most effective tactics is to twist the loneliness into something toxic. They'll whisper, "You're too good for these people. They're shallow. They don't appreciate you. You should just leave. Go find a community that's more pure." That's not the voice of the Holy Spirit. That's spiritual pride dressed up as discernment. The Holy Spirit's voice is different. It says, stay, be kind, speak the truth when it's time, but be patient. Offer this dryness for them. They don't understand you, but I do, and that's enough. The demonic isolation makes you bitter, critical, and restless. The divine isolation makes you peaceful, sorrowful, and anchored. The difference is detectable in the will. If your loneliness is making you despise others, you've lost the plot. But if your loneliness is making you pray for others more fervently, even as you feel estranged from them, then you're still in the citadel and not in the ditch. So let's get practical. What do you do when you're up there? Because the temptation is to just endure, to grit your teeth and wait for a change. But the citadel is not a waiting room, it's an active post. A watchman has duties. First, he scans the horizon. In the spiritual sense, this means you must develop the habit of mental prayer, particularly the kind of prayer where you simply place yourself in the presence of God and ask Him to show you what you need to see. Not necessarily visions or locutions, those are rare, but insights about your own soul, about the state of the world, about the needs of the church. You develop a kind of radar for spiritual danger. You'll find, if you stick with it, that you start to sense when a temptation is approaching before it's fully upon you. You'll sense when someone you're talking to is in a dangerous spiritual state, even if they're smiling. This is not a psychic gift. It's the fruit of watchfulness. The citadel heightens your perception because you're not distracted by the noise of the town. Second, a watchman keeps the fire lit. In the old days, they would have a brazier burning, a signal fire that could be seen from other citadels along the mountain range. That fire is the fire of charity. Your specific, hidden acts of love keep the fire going. It's the little things, the dishes you do without complaint, the phone call you make to your difficult relative, the rosary you pray through a fog of distractions, the small fast you offer for the conversion of a soul you've never met. In the valley, everyone sees the big gestures. In the citadel, no one sees. And that's the point. You're learning to love purely for God's sake alone with no human applause. That's a kind of love that most people never have to learn because they have a constant feedback loop of affirmation. You don't get that loop anymore. You get silence. And into that silence, you pour your tiny, unseen acts of will, and they feed a fire that gives light to the whole region, even if the region doesn't know it. Third, the watchman stays awake. This is the hard one. Spiritual sloth, that noonday devil, loves to visit the citadel. It comes in the form of a thought. What's the point? No one cares if I pray. No one notices if I fall. The battle is the same tomorrow as it was today. I might as well sleep. And the sleep it offers is not physical sleep, though that can be part of it. It's a sleep of the will. You stop straining toward God. You settle into a kind of dull, passive existence where you're not exactly sinning mortally, but you're not loving either. You're just there. The watchman who falls asleep is still in the citadel, technically. His body is present, but his function is dead, and the enemy can walk right past. So the battle against sloth is fought with small, deliberate acts of the will, getting up at the appointed time for prayer, even when there's no feeling, saying the words of the rosary slowly, even when your mind is a beehive, going to confession not because you have a list of dramatic sins, but because you need the grace to keep watching. These small acts are the equivalent of the watchman stamping his feet to keep the blood flowing, slapping his own face to stay alert. They're not heroic. They're just faithful, and faithfulness is what the citadel is built on. Now, there's a particular cross that needs its own space, and that's the cross of the married, chosen soul. Because in marriage, you are one flesh with someone. That person is supposed to be your closest companion. And I have spoken with souls, good, devout souls, who find that as they advance in the interior life, a chasm opens between them and their spouse. The spouse remains at a certain level of the spiritual life, and that level is real and good, but it doesn't require the same vigilance, the same detachment, the same intensity of prayer. And the chosen soul finds that the one person they most want to share their heart with simply doesn't get it. You try to talk about a grace you received at Mass, and your spouse looks at you with a kind of puzzled boredom, or worse, a flicker of irritation, as if your fervor is an implicit criticism of their lack of it. And so you stop talking. You go silent not because you're angry, but because you can't keep opening a door that leads to a blank wall. The loneliness in that situation is uniquely sharp. It's a loneliness that has a face, a name, a body sleeping next to you in the dark. What do? This is delicate. The first thing is to reject the temptation to become a covert missionary to your spouse. You cannot nag someone into the citadel. You cannot lecture them up the mountain. The only thing that works is the quiet, consistent witness of a life lived in the fear of the Lord, combined with an absolute refusal to let the loneliness curdle into resentment. You have to keep loving them with your actions, keep serving them, keep being physically affectionate if that's their love language, keep listening to their concerns about work or health or the leaky faucet, even while your soul is crying out for a conversation about the four last things. And you have to offer that cry. You take that ache, that feeling of being married but not accompanied, and you place it on the paten during the offertory. It becomes your secret sacrifice, and you trust. This is a hard trust, that God will use your hidden suffering to sanctify your spouse in ways that your words never could. Grace works like water through stone. It's slow, you don't see the erosion, but it's real. And what about the single soul? The single chosen soul is often treated as if they're in a waiting room, as if their life hasn't started yet. That's a lie. The single state, accepted as a divine vocation, is not a lack. It's a direct participation in the celibate love of Christ for his church. But oh, the practical pain of it, coming home to an empty apartment night after night. Attending parish events where everyone else seems to belong to a family unit and you're the extra piece that doesn't fit the puzzle. The well-meaning question, So, have you met someone and the smile you have to paste on your face? The citadel for the single soul is often a very small, very quiet apartment, and the temptation there is to fill the silence with noise, with streaming services, with social media, with endless scrolling that numbs the ache but also numbs the ability to pray. The single soul must learn to treat that empty apartment as an oratory, not in a forced, saccharine way, not by pretending that a frozen dinner for one is a banquet, but by deliberately consecrating that space, a crucifix on the wall, a candle lit during prayer, a schedule that includes time for spiritual reading and adoration. You make the emptiness a place of encounter, not just a void, and you let the silence be populated by the communion of saints, because that's not a metaphor, they're real. Your guardian angel is in that apartment with you, your patron saint, the souls in purgatory you pray for. They know you, they see you, they love you with a love that is purified and powerful. The world tells you that you're alone because there's no other human body in the room. The church tells you that you're surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. Which report are you going to believe? Your faith must be more real than your feelings, or you won't survive the night. Now, I want to tell you something that you might not have considered. The watchman in the citadel is not just a solitary figure shouting into the wind. In the ancient world, citadels were part of a network. They were built in lines of sight. One watchman could signal the next, and the next, and the next, so that a warning could travel 100 miles in an hour. This is the communion of saints. You may not see the other watchmen on this earth. You may not know their names, but they are there on their own ridges, in their own dioceses, in their own monasteries and living rooms. And when you pray, when you offer your night, you are lighting a signal fire that a watchman 3 ridges over can see, and his fire answers yours. And together, you form a chain of light that holds back a darkness the valley cannot even perceive. So do not despise your lack of local, visible friends. You have been integrated into a network that spans time and space. Some of your closest collaborators are in the church triumphant, and they are more effective friends than anyone you've ever had coffee with. But I promised you I wouldn't just give you theology. I want to give you a story, a real kind of story, the sort you might hear in a quiet conversation after a retreat. There was a woman, I'll call her Claire, who had a profound reversion to the faith in her late 30s. She started going to daily mass. She discovered the rosary. She read the lives of the saints and felt like she'd found her family for the first time. And almost immediately, she lost every single one of her old friends. They weren't bad women. They were the soccer moms, the book club members, the ones she used to drink wine with and complain about life. But now she couldn't complain anymore because everything she wanted to say was about mercy and grace and the terrifying beauty of the Mass. And when she tried, the table went quiet. One of them even said to her, "Claire, you've changed. We don't know how to talk to you anymore." She came to me nearly in tears, and she said, "I don't think I'm being proud. I think I'm just different." And it hurts so much. I asked her, "What do you do when you get home after one of those failed attempts at connection?" And she thought for a moment, and she said, "I kneel. I just kneel in my room and I talk to Our Lady. She's the only one who doesn't find me strange." And I said, "Then you have your answer. You haven't lost your friends. You've traded up. And the pain you feel is the growing pain of a heart that's being stretched to hold something bigger than it used to hold. Don't medicate it. Offer it." And that's the crux of the whole thing. The chosen soul must become an offering, not a complainer, not a victim. An offering. The loneliness is not an accident. It's the material of a holocaust. In the Old Testament, a holocaust was a sacrifice that was entirely burned, with nothing left for the priest to eat. It was total. That's what God is asking from some souls. He's asking for a total offering of their need for human understanding so that he can fill that need with himself and then channel through them a torrent of grace for others. But you can't be a channel if you're always leaking. If every time you feel the ache, you rush to fill it with a substitute, a binge, an inappropriate conversation, a fantasy life, you nullify the sacrifice. The grace doesn't flow. The citadel becomes just a drafty, uncomfortable room instead of a place of power. Now, I can hear someone objecting, but isn't this just encouraging isolation and introversion? Didn't God say it is not good for man to be alone? Yes, he did, and he provided a remedy. For most, that remedy is marriage or a healthy community, but the aloneness he was talking about in Genesis was an aloneness of kind. Adam had no one of his own nature to complement him. The chosen soul in the citadel is not alone in that fundamental sense. The chosen soul is in a state of profound, supernatural communion. The problem is that we have such a collapsed, flattened view of reality that we cannot feel that communion. We rely so heavily on the senses that we think the spiritual world is less real than the physical one. But it's the other way around. The spiritual world is more real. The physical world is passing. The citadel is built on the rock of the spiritual world. And the watchman who lives there is learning, slowly, to feel the weight of that reality. It takes time. The training of the spiritual senses is a slow process. You'll have days when you feel like you're just talking to the wall. That's okay. Keep talking. The will is engaged, even when the emotions are flat. And the will is what loves. Let's take a moment to look at the model of all this, Our Lady. She was the most chosen soul in history, immaculately conceived, full of grace. Did she have zero friends? No. She had Saint Joseph. She had Saint Elizabeth. She had the holy women. She had the Apostle John. But notice the quality of those friendships. They were not casual. They were not recreational. They were forged in the fire of a shared mission. And yet, even with those closest to her, there was a solitude that no one could enter. Her heart was pierced with a sword of knowledge of her son's identity and his impending passion, that she could not fully communicate. She treasured these things in her heart. That treasuring was often a solitary act. She didn't complain about it. She didn't form a support group for mothers of the Messiah. She stood at the foot of the cross when nearly everyone else had fled. She stood, and in that standing, her solitude became the channel for the salvation of the world. Our Lady is the perfect watchman. Her citadel was not on a mountain ridge, it was the hill of Calvary. And from that hill, she saw the enemy clearly, the ancient serpent, and she crushed his head, not by coming down to argue with him, but by remaining in the will of God, united to the sacrifice of her Son. So, if you are in this state, I want you to look at Our Lady, not to compare your suffering to hers in a competitive way, but to see the shape of a life fully given. She had moments of profound human consolation. The visitation comes to mind, that beautiful exchange of joy with Elizabeth. God does not leave the watchman without any visitation. He sends a fellow watcher now and then, someone who climbs up the path with a skin of water and a bit of bread, and you share the meal and your hearts burn within you. And then they go back down and you are alone again. But the memory of that communion sustains you for a long time. You must learn to receive those visitations as gifts, not as rites. And when they don't come, you turn your face back to the darkness and you watch. Now, before I close, I need to give you a very practical, even blunt piece of guidance. The citadel has a door, and you have the key. There will be moments when the loneliness is so acute that you will be tempted to open that door and walk down the mountain, back to the town, back to the old ways. The door might look like an old friendship that suddenly resurfaces with an invitation that feels like a lifeline. It might look like a new relationship that promises to fill every hole in your heart, but does so by demanding that you compromise your conscience just a little. It might look like a numbing behavior, drinking, overeating, overworking, that takes the edge off the isolation. That door is always there. And the demons know it. They will knock on it. They will make the voice sound exactly like the voice of a friend you've been longing for. But here is the test. Does opening that door increase or decrease your desire for prayer? Does it make you more or less faithful to your duties? Does it stir up contrition or does it stir up rationalization of sin? The citadel is only safe if you keep the door barred against anything that weakens your will's adhesion to God. This is not about being scrupulous, it's about being watchful. A watchman who lets just anyone into the citadel is not hospitable, he's negligent. I want to bring us to a point of decision now. You didn't ask for this post. I know that. Most watchmen were assigned by a commanding officer who didn't consult them. You woke up one day and realized the comfortable friendships of your past had melted away and you couldn't get them back. And you've been trying to make sense of it ever since. Some of you have been angry with God about it. You've said, I'm trying to serve you, and you've taken everything. That anger is understandable. But I'm asking you now in the quiet of your will to re-examine that anger. What if the taking was not a punishment, but a preparation? What if the everything he took was a collection of disordered attachments that were keeping you from the one thing necessary? What if he's been clearing the mountain path because he intends to give you something far greater than a comfortable social circle? What if he intends to give you himself in a way that only those who have been emptied of human consolations can receive? I can almost hear the resistance rising in your heart. That sounds nice, but it still hurts. Yes. It hurts. I never said it wouldn't. The body of the watchman aches. The heart longs. The mind wonders if it's all a delusion. That is the human condition. Our Lord in Gethsemane felt the full weight of human abandonment, and he asked that the cup pass if possible. He knows what it is to have zero friends in that hour. The apostles slept. Judas was betraying him. The crowds were turning. And he sweat blood. So if you are in a place where your prayer feels like sweating blood, you are not in a strange, unchristian place. You are in Gethsemane with him, and he is with you. But you must say the words he said, not my will, but thine be done. That's the act that transforms suffering into sacrifice. Without that act, the citadel is just a cold stone box. With that act, the citadel becomes the antechamber of the resurrection. So I'm going to ask you to do something, not with emotion, with the will. Make a conscious choice right now. In the silence of your heart, say this slowly, deliberately, meaning each word as an act of trust. Lord, I accept the post you have given me. I do not fully understand it. I feel the cold and the solitude. But I trust that your providence has placed me here, not to harm me, but to use me. I offer you my loneliness. I unite it to your abandonment on the cross. I ask for the grace to remain awake, to keep the fire lit, to watch faithfully. And if it be your will, send me the companions you choose in your time and way. But let it be your will, not mine. Go ahead, repeat that quietly, not just the words, the substance. Let your will settle into that disposition like a stone settling into the foundation of the tower. It's not a one-time thing. You'll need to renew it. Maybe tonight, when you're lying in bed and the silence is loud. Maybe next Sunday in that parking lot. Maybe at the family dinner when you feel like an alien. Renew it. Lord, I accept the post. The citadel is not a tomb, it's a watchtower. And the watchman who keeps his post through the long night will be the first to see the gray light of dawn on the horizon. The dawn is coming. The Son of Justice will rise with healing in his wings. And when he comes, he will not ask you how many friends you had. He will ask if you were faithful where he placed you. And he will invite you into a friendship that is so total, so intimate, so perfectly satisfying that every earthly loneliness you endured will seem, in retrospect, like a very small price to pay for the infinite weight of glory that is now yours forever. The citadel stands, the wind howls. But you are not the wind, you are the watchman, and the watchman belongs to the Lord of the mountain. Stay there, he is with you.